do not celebrate the holy Eid al-Fitr, or feast of breaking the fasting month, while also conducting crimes. Such is the meaning of sanctification of welcoming religious great feast day has altered to become self-imposed dissipation. Then the good deeds for families and relatives has changed its function into forcing oneself to pay for the family's transportation to the hometown. Thus people slip to the crime. News in mass media reports the prevalence of stealings and robberies and other crimes on the days prior to the fasting months and Eid al-Fitr. And when they were asked by the police what was the motive of the crimes, many of them answered that they were looking for money to fund the Eid al-Fitr and traveling to their hometowns. And that is the fact. Thus be understood of that as the consequences of dissipation on Eid al-Fitr and going to hometown. Therefore, the essence of holiness of religious feast day has altered. It has more harms than benefits, and the holiness of Eid al-Fitr cannot be maintained any longer. The holy rituals then mix up with mass crimes, which take the advantage of the holidays and going to hometown as the chance to steal, rob, or force oneself intentionally through whatsoever way to get the money for paying the homecoming expenses. Try to imagine the bustle of the ground, sea, and air transportation services to fulfill the ticket demands, which rise incredibly and cannot be handled. And try to imagine the distress of all people to go to their hometowns. Thus, it also applies in the management and facilitation to fulfill the sudden increase of the homecomers, which each year become unmanageable. And that condition causes the occurrence of various crimes. Thus God brings all people around to avoid such worst condition. Hence He blesses only one religious feast day, that is on January 1st, for all adherents in this world. Therefore, all humankinds in this world, at the same moment, we share the love to each other and pray and ask for God's blessing all together. Welcoming the feast day of New Year means to get together and wait for God's words that are deliberately descended down for the celebration of the awaiting New Year. And it implies that New Year celebration is a very sacred worship day. Thus it will eliminate and replace the customary to celebrate New Year in dissipation and drinking spree. Then the earth will be full of blessings and all humans feel cheered. And God commands not to continue practicing fasting and perform Hajj and conduct 5 times prayers or salat, as well as to celebrate the feast of Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. Those matters should be changed totally. Muslims need not to feel their communications with God are impeded if they perform not 5 times prayers. If you believe it not, let's together watch the faith turbidity of Muslims nowadays, which dispute against each other, defending their own mazhab and sects. there is no harmony. Even they calumniate, intimidate, blaspheme, and murder each other, as well as attack each other, and try to dominate one another amongst their fellow Muslims. Many Muslim countries are in troubles and fail to overcome them, and as the result, many nations are get involved, and it disgraces Islam as the teaching that descended down by God. Could you see how crowded the Muslim refugees move to various countries seeking for asylum and job, as well as a new place to stay, which is safer and more promising of peacefulness and welfare rather than in their own country? Thus, how could Islam adherents purify their faith if there is no way that would be accepted, for they consider Islam as the truest religion amongst all existent religions in this world? Would you see those all as a perversion that is already too far? For Islam has become an acute world problem and cannot be overcome. Truly, we feel sympathetic upon the struggle of Palestinians who are persistent and pitiful. And indeed, we regret the Israel troops who bombard Gaza without any mercy. Both parties which put the word security at stake. It cannot be denied anymore that the war between Palestine and Israel has involved many nations in this world. Such also the horrible war that happens in Syria, which has also involved many countries, for the government of Bashar al-Assad is supported by Russia, Tiongkok, and Iran, while the United States and its allies worry about Syria's condition under the government of Bashar al-Assad and then help the warriors who fight against the army of Bashar al-Assad. Meanwhile, the world also worries about the vicious movement of the Islamic State in that area, which also involves many countries. Even their threats and ferociousness have already spread worldwide, such as the Islamic State's attack on Charlie Hebdo tabloid in France and the Islamic State's threat toward Japan, asking for high ransom to be paid for 2 Japanese citizens who were held as hostages. And in fact, they ensure their viciousness by killing those 2 hostages, Kenji Goto and Haruna Yukawa, and so Japan engages in vengeance upon the Islamic State. Jordan was also shocked by the slaughter upon Jordanian pilot Muaz al-Qasasbeh by the Islamic State. The next vicious act done by the Islamic State was the burning of 45 Iraqi citizens while they were still alive. What does the Islamic State want with those cruel and sadistic actions, except just showing the savagery and confusion of the concept of the Islamic radical ideology? Infinite is the resentment of the nations that experience disturbance by the Islamic State terrorists who arbitrarily execute their citizens. The revenge is only heading in one direction, that is the world war, which is triggered by the vengeance upon terrorism. When the hot temperature of world politics becomes more smaller due to the occurrence of the explosions of Malaysia Airlines MH17 aircraft by Ukraine separatists, which inevitably instigates scorn upon Russia when Russia strengthens its army force, and so is the United States. Upon this fact, the word war seems unavoidable. Thus, the tension between those two superpower countries is being concerned, for it could instigate the occurrence of the Third World War, considering those two countries have involved their allies of many nations in the world. While the bloc of Muslim countries exists in the midst of political difference between the bloc of communist countries and the bloc of Western countries, and none of them are able to solve the problems and make peace. When the war is waged by the threat of world war, it could directly cause the sharpening of geopolitical and geo-economic arena, especially related to the power competition in monopolizing the oil commodity, which is an urgent need in the whole world. Thus, oil is a crucial commodity, for there is an assumption that whoever wishes to dominate the world controls it by monopolizing the oil resources. When the world is threatened by the Third World War, then the ambition to control the oil becomes very important for a country that wants to rule over all the powers in the world. A domination upon the oil resources is equal as having the ability to control the world economy. When the ambition of dominating the oil resources switches to be held by the terrorists, thus the countries that need oil will struggle to deal with terrorism. And it could be a disaster for the world. The oil resources in Middle East, if those are taken by the terrorists, then the price of oil in the world cannot be predicted. The price will be higher or lower, depends on the interest of the terrorists, and their interest is the victory of terrorists. It could be assumed as a disaster for the world economy, for all countries in the world are scared of the terrorist attacks, particularly the Islamic State. The fury upon the Islamic State and other terrorists does not close the possibility to create political deadlock upon all parties with conflicting political views, or amongst the countries that would like to protect their countries and nations from the sudden attack or just a threat by the terrorists, and political upheavals that influence the economic policies and prevention of inflation, as well as the currency exchange rate, which is open to be debating in the dynamics of the stock market and capital markets. These conditions might be controlled by the oil mafia that will lead to economic crisis or even might reach a chaos. And all countries are pensive to ponder how to rehabilitate all systems in their countries in order not to make them as confused or paranoid countries in facing the threats from terrorists through whatever means that could be happened. OPEC, Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, are overwhelmed in making correction to the phenomenon of declining global oil price. The collapse of the global oil price happens due to many factors, namely political and economic aspects. In the long term, it is difficult to overcome the excessive oil production from countries that could determine the market price, such as the United States and Saudi Arabia. For the political interest is related to the friction between the United States and Russia regarding the crisis of Ukraine and the concerns of Saudi Arabia about the change of power constellation in the region, which is profitable for Iran, as well as its defeat in Syria crisis, has forced Riyadh and Washington to determine together a strategy to lower the oil price in order to increase the repression against the rivals. As for the OPEC, this organization has no power to hold their important and influential country members, whom act beyond the organization corridor and heed more personal gain. Thus, OPEC has no power of institution coherency, as well as it has no power to make decisions that beneficial and just for its members. Regarding the global economy, it is becoming dreary and exists in a confusing intersection. Global economy only relies on the United States that also experiences economic depression. The drop in oil price brings positive impact upon the global economy, for it will increase the economy of the oil importer countries. However, it also creates a market shock. The world price of oil is the indicator of the world economy, since the crude oil is very much needed to conduct economic activities. The drop in world price of oil has negative impact on the stock returns of mining sector. If the price of energy is declining, it reflects the weakening of the global economic recovery. With the slowdown of global economy, the situation will affect the decrease in money market and capital market of the world. Global economic crisis will worsen when God determines the disappearance of haram money in the whole world. Surely, global deflation will happen, but it is God's way of cleaning the haram money in the whole world. This early notification could be regarded as God's help to prepare for the heavy situation. The occurrence is intended for the sanctification of all nations. Deflation because of sanctification of haram money is different from the terrorist threat upon the oil prices and their involvement in the capital market and stock exchange, but equally would lead to chaos upon the global economy. But the chaos caused by the destruction of haram money will not last long, for God will give out the solution. Considering the threat of terrorism and the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, and the vicious Boko Haram, that every time always raises issues of new atrocities in various countries, particularly the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda and Taliban, while they also play a role in the oil price, capital market and stock exchange. Therefore, it could be imagined the chaos of the world economy. It is no more than the direction of the metamorphosis of terrorism conjunction to force their will. Terrorism is correlated with Islam as the religion of the terrorists. Thus God is securing Islam from the deteriorating image by enacting the abrogation of all religions and unification of all religions for the sake of decreasing the world's problems that threaten the occurrence of Third World War. Thus we feel sorry for all the war tragedies in this world, since at the end it will only cause suffering for all people in the world. Since in this period of time, all mechanisms are embraced in the mechanism of globalization. Thus all impacts will have influence on each other upon all countries. Moreover, the impacts of doomsday process are still undergoing. Therefore, whoever involves in the world war is surely within God's curse. From all kinds of the causes of war, the one that is most loathed by God is war in the name of religion, since actually it is the religious teaching that's supposed to be used completely to bring serenity and peace to all conflicts and enmities. When the world is besieged by various wars in the name of religion, and it is Muslims who are found as the party that are involved in the majority of wars in this world. Thus God blames Islam adherents. Thus when Muslims would like to know God's judgment upon the deeds of Islam adherents in this world, and I state that Muslims are positioned by God as the guilty adherents, so they are unworthy to be defended by God. We need to convey a flashback regarding the curse of Jews in the past to be compared with the curse of Muslims in this present time, that the Jewish ones was stranded without possessing any country and had experienced genocide. If Muslims now are in the position as Jews in the past, look yourself in the mirror on the fate of Jews in the past, when they received the curse from God, for they were breaking their religion and crucified Jesus. Thus the fate of Jews in the past is now experienced by Muslims, who also boast of their religion. So they are involved in many hostilities and wars, which their demands are in the name of their religion. And the most fatal of Muslim stance is they unintentionally have defied God whom they love, for they have rejected and tyrannized God's messenger in this era. That action cannot only be categorized as blasphemy upon God's messenger, but also the impediment of God's help for all the inhabitants of this earth when the process of doomsday befalls on this earth. Moreover, Muslims have rejected heaven when God would like to establish it on this earth. And is there any defiance as severe as that by God's side in all ages? Only in this era exists such severe defiance and a curse. Since by God's side, the blessing of heaven for human beings is the truest covenant amongst all of his covenants unto all human beings. And regarding the absoluteness of heaven in God's covenant for all religions, it is the highest covenant, and when it is rejected, is there any other covenant could be made to cleanse the rejection upon heaven and oppression upon his messenger, whom he asks to declare his heaven? Is there any covenant could be enacted by Islam adherents unto God to claim that their rejection is not done by Islam adherents? Whereas it is obvious that Islam adherents have come forward to attack and defame the messengers of Eden, who are declaring heaven and his kingdom. Thus God's curse upon Islam adherents has been really experienced by them in the whole world. There is none could be done by Islam adherents for the revival and unification of Islam, let alone the victory of Islam. Now, is there any sin that is more serious than the sin that has been done by Islam adherents in Indonesia? And when the war between Palestine and Israel cannot be stopped, then will God defend one of them? If it is impossible to defend both of them, and if it is what God should respond, considering the Jews and Muslim are both the adherents of Allah, thus surely there will be no result. God's defense is surely through the choice upon the party who has fewer mistakes, since there is no party who has no mistake. If it should be stated by God, that surely God explains all matters related to religious problems before he decided to abrogate all religions and determine the solution for all religious adherents. And when God wishes to state his solution in detail one by one, thus the Jewish mistakes will be detailed, and so will the mistakes of Islam adherents. Whereas the mistakes of Islam adherents are for conducting destruction and disorder as well as tyranny, which have encompassed many nations in this world and have caused difficulties in creating world peace. The threat from Muslims is worried by all nations in this world, and such issue could be measured surpassing the level of Jewish threat worldwide. The Israel war is only unto Palestine and its allies, and not expands to other areas. Verily, God hates wars and allies of people who fight against each other. For the hatred of one nation unto another nation has involved other nations as well, and that could cause world war. Therefore, do not see God as taking sides unto the Jews, and judge that God is not defending Islam. Thus, try to see clear upon God's decision to abrogate all religions, and his will to unify all religions. It is the finest solution and unimpeachable. Whenever Islam adherents protest God's response and his siding toward Jews and Western Bloc, thus do not blame God if he wishes not to give role to Islam countries in overcoming religious issues in the world. And do not blame God if he is not willing to make an agreement with the leaders of terrorist and radical Muslim, except if they shift their religious orientation and are ready to neutralize their faith. When we see the bombardment of Gaza territory by Israel, which is inhumane, and it is watched by the world society. Indeed, all people in this world watch the savagery of Israel's soldiers upon Palestinians, and verily make the world mourn upon the fate of that nation. And this God's judgment becomes uncomfortable to be conveyed. For God surely could justify not Israel's actions toward Palestine, and God could only curse both parties, for Israel's action to bombard Gaza is also caused by annoyance of Palestine's missiles. If one wishes not to be forced to accept justification or defense upon one of both parties, then what we have explained is judgment from God, which has barrier with the judgment from Muslims around the world, who consider Israel's action has violated international law of war, and Palestine is never considered as the party that occupies the right of territory of Israel upon the land occupied by Palestine, as part of the territory of God's covenant for Israel, which its spread covers the land of Canaan from the wilderness and up to Mount Lebanon, as far as the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and to the great sea. And it is God's command unto Joshua to take back the land of Canaan, whilst God states that Benjamin Netanyahu is the reincarnation of Joshua, so beyond his consciousness, his spirit is called to carry out God's command. Unfortunately, the condition now cannot be explained as what it is supposed to happen, for the weaponry in this modern era is severely vicious. But this is the truth of the history of God's previous revelation, and which has made Israel now appears as the nation which is struggling to take back God's promised land upon them. Regardless of the existence of that covenant, but this war is verily beyond humanity, and it is regretted by God. It is stated in the Holy Bible, chapter Joshua 1, verses 3 and 4. In subchapter, the Lord commands Joshua. The Holy Bible, chapter Joshua 1, verses 3 and 4. Subchapter, the Lord commands Joshua. Verse 3. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon I have given you, as I said to Moses. Verse 4. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and to the great sea toward the going down of the sun, shall be your territory, for the sake of taking care the word peace. It is better that firstly Israelites and Palestinians should make peace. The peace will calm down all emotions and insolence which strikes the world. And these are God's words for Israelites as follows. Hi Israelites, make peace with Palestinians, for I shall make you a new covenant. But I remind you, look at your hands that are full of Palestinians' blood, and I show the world the sad tidings which hurts Muslims' hearts throughout the world. You should take responsibility of what you have done to Palestinians before me, and I will conduct my court of justice upon everything that is related to vicious wars in this world. Cease bombardment in Gaza, and do not look back, and heed this covenant that I give you. When the doomsday happens in the next few years, what is the purpose of being in war to fight over a territory? And what is the benefit that you are disputing over religion continuously? I truly wish to end all conflicts which exist in this world. Therefore, unto Israelites, especially to Benjamin Netanyahu and Simon Peres, I state, I end the war with Palestinians. Just give Palestine's territory to Palestinians, so the world will be peaceful. And unto Israelites, I remind you that I still have another covenant for you. That is the covenant in the Holy Bible, chapter Revelation 7. Chapter God's people will be preserved. This covenant is cited in verses 4 to 8. The Holy Bible, chapter Revelation 7, verses 4 to 8. Verse 4. Then I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from all the tribes of Israel. Verse 5. From the tribe of Judah, 12,000 were sealed. From the tribe of Reuben, 12,000. From the tribe of Gad, 12,000. Verse 6. From the tribe of Asher, 12,000. From the tribe of Naphtali, 12,000. From the tribe of Manasseh, 12,000. Verse 7. From the tribe of Simeon, 12,000. From the tribe of Levi, 12,000. From the tribe of Issachar, 12,000. Verse 8. From the tribe of Zebulun, 12,000. From the tribe of Joseph, 12,000. From the tribe of Benjamin, 12,000. Thus it is better to see that my new covenant is more beneficial for both parties and for the world, and it is the salvation for me. As for the covenant for Israel, I have cited a long time ago, but now is the time to fulfill it. Thus, I just opened the seal now. All of the tribes that I have mentioned, from Israelites as many as 144,000 people, are the first ones that I give my blessing for them to be in the first group that I salvage to move to the new earth. As for my purpose, it is to replace the old promised land upon the territory of Canaan with a new territory on the new earth, and as the consequence is as many as the sealed 144,000 Israelites, I give them the right to be evacuated to the main outer spaceship, Surga Eden Darussalam, when the ships has halted, to gradually evacuate this earth's inhabitants to the new earth. As for my covenant, it is definitely effective when the world is facing the gust of vast calamities, and that condition is already being possessed. Hence, actually this my covenant soon will be fulfilled nowadays. Thus is God's covenant unto Israel, whilst the war of Israel with Palestine has been going on for a very long period, but no one has tried to remember that God's covenant unto Israel. As for the fight of Palestinians toward Israel, it is not the same as the fight of Israelites in establishing their country in Israel all this time. Long before the war with Palestine, Israel has been in war to fight for their country's freedom from Muslim countries in that area. Is there anybody who would deny this fact? Try to consider the persistency of Palestine in fighting for a span of their land from Israel, and Israel's soldiers who fight for God's covenant unto Israel upon the promised land for Israel. If all parties are willing to simplify all vengeance and criticality and complexity, we offer this elucidation to be discussed by all parties, so all parties could understand God's consideration upon all that are being disputed all this time. Rather than all parties are disputing on something that God considers not as the righteousness endeavor. Instead, God considers as stupidity in addressing their own fight, for they refuse to heed God's sign upon the promised land for Israel. God has provided His sign related to His promised land unto Israel, that as long as the promised land unto Israel has not yet fulfilled, then forever in that area would suffer from the curse. Thus all that promised land forever will be filled with riots and wars. If this matter would be heeded, there will not be any victim dies uselessly from all parties. Therefore, this time the first thing to be done by God is to abrogate all religions and unify all religions. So there will be no more excuse to defend their own religion for God's sake, which then makes all parties feel that they are the truest and are fighting for their jihad for God, and war spread out extensively as if there is no ending. This new God's covenant makes it clear that the unification of all religions is more rewarded, although its worship ritual is simpler and easier. Be certain that this simpler and easier ritual is more blessed and more fulfilled. This God's stipulation renders all religious adherents from any religion will prefer to choose worship ritual that is not complicated and not burdensome, but easier to get an answered prayer from God. And Christians also do not need to celebrate Christmas by expressing the memory of the birth of Jesus. Whereas Buddhists do not need to celebrate Vesak anymore, so are Hindus no need to celebrate their feast days, such as Nyepi, Day of Silence, and Galungan, celebrating the victory of Dharma over Adharma. Thus, all religious feast days are held no more from this time onwards, for the sake of accepting the unification of all religions that is universal, by celebrating the only one religious feast day, that is the day to welcome the New Year January 1st. It is enough to pray anytime and anywhere, whenever his adherents need his help. The most important is to shun away from any sin and do good deeds as much as possible, so you will be honored and your prayer will be answered by God. Say your prayer in any kind of language, for God determines not certain language as the most accepted by Him, so that He is willing to answer the prayer. Verily, say your prayer in your own language, for God is the most understanding of all languages in this world, and prioritizes not any language. Even God understands any local language that exists on this earth. And indeed, it greatly facilitates all people in saying their prayers, and for people, it is a convenience for all people to pray unto God, and for God, it becomes easy to show the blessing of a prayer through the new way that He establishes today. People who are confused with religion and who are realistic say, we are not only protected from religious conflicts and anarchism, as well as religious intrigues, but we are also healthy physically and spiritually. Thinking positively and like to conduct good deeds and believe in the oneness of God is experienced as a joint protection for all. A metaphor of this personality improvement will tightly compete with the call of jihad or holy war for the sake of religion. This condition then will prolong to be jihad for the world peace and peace upon all religions, and that difference, without being realized, will reverberate rapidly to become a new spiritual movement in the world. Since this new teaching is not disseminated under any mission of certain religion, and the crossing point of that inspiration comes from neutral and scientific communication, thus its dissemination is easier to be accepted, included by religious people. The New Era movement has stepped away from the foppery of religious fanaticism, which has haunted the world, but God's role is not avoided. Rather, it is rationalized to become a faith which keeps growing and lives and moves dynamically, covering the tradition of renewed metaphysics and non-fragmented spiritualism and science that can answer apocalyptic issues. And the world is enlightened and also prevented from any religious turmoil. Theological perspective, which I bring forth related to the abrogation of all religions, but belief in the oneness of God, is in line with the demand of New Age spiritualism. Modern theosophy introduces better the concepts of karma and reincarnation that is justified by God as a concept of justice in eternity. The followers of Theosophism, mysticism that unifies the theory of metaphysics and science, are like dryness poured by the rain. Modern man can understand better the explanation of religion through that alternative scientific system. The thinking concept of virtual world is entering the logic of eternity without having fear of offending religious fanaticism. Since there is an objectivity of UFO and alien, which is more interesting to be discussed. Through the theory of relativity of Einstein, God strengthens the existence of civilization of alien creatures. That in this universe there is another life, which is completely different and undetected. Thus is the relativity of life that is universe-wide. As for quantum theory, which is inclined toward the concept of the unseen abstract, it can be explored through the real works of angels in the creation of crop circles, which is prominent in the concept of open millennialism, and it is implemented not only to justify the quantum theory, but also to complete the data of the science of the end times. Nature is the object of sciences, which is very complex, and God respects Einstein's theory of relativity and affirms it through elucidation of the universe from his side. An Einstein theory of relativity is embraced in God's stipulation, which confirms that universal spaces do not grow without limit, and the speed of light itself has limit. And this limit becomes the limitation of movement for all that are presumed without limit in the scale of universal coverage. Particles in the universe interact with each other to form an object that gives a mass, and there is a correlation between a mass and energy. And that is the provision of the beginning of a universal object. The heat of the sun as the absolute idealism grows and nurtures the sustainability of development and enlargement in the universe. Seen through the light and the heat of the sun, it manifests the chemical reaction of the elements of nature, which then process to create mass and energy. Global rotation in the universe forms universal objects, which adjust themselves in the globality. Hence, there is a theory that what is firstly created and its system is developed by God is the sun and the elements of universal objects. Chemical compound amongst universal substances and elements creates energy wave movement and concentration of energy as well. There occurs mass formation, energy wave and energy concentration that rotate to become a vortex, and that energy vortex creates the formation of mass manifestation to become the universal objects. Hence, the energy vortex in the universe is in accordance with the rotation of God's globality. If we should match the understanding of the Holy Spirit, which is blessed by God as the bearer of His revelations into human world, and I state that my spirit is the spirit of the Son. Thus, God's stipulation upon myself is to be the enlightener of faith and spirituality, and the light and heat provider for the universe, and that is a synchronization of duty and function. My duty is to preserve the purity of God's revelations, and I am the first of God's creation. Thus I obligate to secure the revelations and keep the faith of noble God's creatures, and maintain the sustainability of the system of universe. That is why my duty and authority become optimum when doomsday is found befalling on earth or other universal objects. Such is the characteristic of God's nature, that always places goodness, truthfulness, virtuousness, and holiness in the highest rank. Since from those natures the balance of the natures is maintained, then peace and serenity are preserved, as also the virtuousness and truthfulness, which then become holiness, and heaven exists as the center of sanctification. Sociology of appeasement is the preservation of development and growth in a good and right manner, and those all derive from the existence of spiritual enlightenment and the radiation of the sunlight. And in the sun, good and holy energies are united. Thus in the sun exists the word of the angels. Therefore, a perception is revealed that the heaven of angels is in the sun. Only absolute holiness exists in heaven. Such is the genuineness of good characters become nobleness, which is always in balance and is never exaggerating or lacking.